In 1966, the Chicago Bears drafted the son of a Pennsylvania coal miner in the 4th round. Doug Buffone would go on to play 15 seasons for the Bears and later be named one of the 100 greatest Bears of all time. His allegiance to the Bears never waned, even when he took to the microphone and witnessed some horrendous Bears teams.
The fact is, there's not the fear put into them, because this game is a lot about fear. You either do the job, or you go home and go sell hamburgers at McDonald's.
Doug told it like it is, and that's part of the reason his nephew John has dedicated this show to Doug. And now John Buffone is spreading Buffone-branded beratements just like his uncle.
Being a Chicago Bears fan is like being in a toxic relationship that you can't get out of. I think I'm finally done, and then they come back and they say, well, things are going to be different this time. I've changed. We've got receivers now. We've got the quarterback now. And even though I've heard this song and dance before, I go back every time.
And he's got pep talks too.
I love this team. And I know everyone watching and listening loves this team. So while we may be pessimistic and cynical, every one of us still has hope that the stars will align at some point. And if that ever does happen, you'll be glad you stuck around.
John is telling it like it is here on Buffone 55. And joining John are Alyssa Barbieri, managing editor of USA Today's NFL Wires, including Bears Wire, and also Danny Shimon, lead game and draft analyst for the Barroom Network. Buckle up and bear down. This is Buffone 55, the John Buffone Show.
I told this search committee that I wanted this job, and there's several reasons why I wanted this job. The first is this place. This place is special. These people are special. Number two is this roster that Ryan's already built. It is stocked, it's loaded. Everyone wants to talk about the quarterback, and Caleb, I'm excited to work with you, but it's going to take more than just you. And there are a lot of pieces already in place. And then finally, I wanted to stay in this division. I know this is the toughest division of football right now. There's 3 teams that made the playoffs this year. I've got tremendous amount of respect for the coaches and the players in this league, having competed against them for the last 6 years. Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, you're talking about 2 guys that are up for Coach of the Year awards. And to be quite frank with you, I kind of enjoyed beating Matt LaFleur twice a year.
Woohoo! Hello and welcome to another edition of Buffone 55. My name is John Buffone, and those opening comments were from, of course, the new head coach of the Chicago Bears. Finally, things appear to be changing. Let's not go overboard, but they appear to be changing for the Chicago Bears. Do I dare to allow myself to be sucked into believing that this franchise has righted its course? We'll see. Do I dare think the organization, which I, for years, have reverted to as a mom-and-pop diner, finally transformed into a 21st century well-run operation? I don't know. I dream. We're going to dig into my feelings here in a little bit, but I'm going to introduce our co-host. We're going to introduce our special guest. But first, let me say that Alyssa Barbieri is not with us tonight. Her responsibilities over at Bears Wire and all the other wires at USA Today have her very, very busy. But my guy, Danny Shimon, is here. And Danny, you know, when we started this show, we were talking about the potential of John Fox and Mike Glennon. Where have the years gone? Now we're talking about Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. How does the latter make you feel?
Oh, it makes me feel much better than John Fox and Mike Glennon. Anytime you put Mike Glennon in there, that sentence, it kind of brings it down right away. But man, Ben Johnson today was very impressive. Came in hot, talking smack to Matt LaFleur. I'm sure that's going to be some bulletin board material there in Green Bay next season. But John, I feel like you feel, man. I was like, what's going on? I mean, after that press conference finished, I didn't feel disgusting. I was kind of encouraged. I was like, yes, we have an adult in the room. We have someone that has a plan, has an idea on how to develop a quarterback, has an idea on how to formulate this offense and hopefully build this team. But like you said, it's like it's a great first step. Today was a great first step, but it's not finished yet, right? So now let's get to work. Let's see them go ahead and get to work and see what Ben Johnson, along with Ryan Poles and the rest of the Bears front office, can go ahead and do and build around Caleb Williams. But there's a lot of things he touched on in that press conference that I want to go over. But I'm sure we have plenty of time to go over here a lot of these talking points here with Ben Johnson today.
Absolutely. And you don't get anything for winning a press conference, but it's a good start. It sounded like he had a plan, sounded like he was confident in what he was saying, sounds like he was confident in the Bears, which, isn't a common commodity. So we'll see what happens. But today felt like a good day. But now I'd like to introduce our special guest for tonight. Bears fans know the name, they know the voice, and they know the keen insight he possesses. His Locked On Bears podcast is one of the most popular amongst Bears fans. We welcome back to the show, Lorin Cox. Lorin, buddy, last time you were on the show, it was about the Bears signing Andy Dalton. And so the years have gone by quickly, but much different tone this time. Thanks for being on.
Hey, happy to be here in a much more easier to celebrate occasion.
I would say so, because I want to dig right into that, because you look at that press conference today, and I want to take a step back. What was your thought process or your reaction to them going after Ben Johnson, not really hesitating too much and getting him under contract, spending the money, and they didn't really Bears it up? So what was your reaction to the news?
Yeah, I think you touched on it there, right? It didn't feel like same old Bears. It feels like a slightly different approach in terms of McCaskey and Warren empowering Poles to go get his guy. The moment the Lions were eliminated, they made no haste. They wasted no time in going and securing him and presumably spending big money on him. We don't know the exact number, but there've been reported numbers around $13+ million a year for Ben Johnson. Like they seem to have gone about this process a little bit differently than the past, where everyone comes back for a second round interview, and there's all this sort of drawing out of the process where a team like the Raiders or Jaguars can get back in on it. But they said, no, we're going to get Ben Johnson. We're going to cast this wide net, but then we don't need to get him in for a second round interview. If we believe in this guy, just go get him. And I think that doesn't guarantee different results, but at least it's not same process expecting same results.
Yeah, and Lorin, you touched on it a little bit there. We kind of touched on it last night as well. Aldo and I was something felt different, right? This search was different. First of all, they fired a coach mid-season. That never happens. They had their target. They went ahead and they went after him the day he was available to actually come in for an in-person interview. They go ahead and they sign him, get the deal done. My only thing is this has got to be the Kevin Warren effect, and this was something that I was hoping that we would see with Kevin Warren once he was there, because going back to the last couple of coaching hires and even front office hires, they've been typical Bears, like John said, they Bears it up, right? They're bringing these guys that they're just kind of starting, first time starting up and let them learn on a job. And even though Ben Johnson is a first time head coach, there is a record behind him in terms of how he designs offenses, call plays, and all that stuff. My thing is this was Kevin Warren's fingerprints all over it. Yeah, he let Ryan Poles kind of take the lead, but do you concur that this was a more of a Kevin Warren effect here on this Bear search?
Yeah, I wonder how much is Kevin Warren and how much is just like not having Ted Phillips also, like the addition by subtraction there too. Like I wonder if it's Kevin Warren pushing the envelope or Kevin Warren just knowing when to get out of the way and to not micromanage the situation. Like we'll never really know exactly how much was that just Poles, like him saying, Ryan, go do your thing and being totally hands off for Poles, which would be a change of pace, or Kevin Warren being hands on, but no, let's do this together and let's do this smarter, which would also be a change of pace from previous processes. But definitely a different feeling and a different energy around the whole search than even the Eberflus and Poles search, where Poles comes in and gets to Eberflus, and it's been 2 days after Poles comes in, he's got to make a decision on a head coach. So it's get this guy, and that doesn't work out quite that well, as opposed to this process. He's been eyeing up Ben Johnson since at least Thanksgiving.
So go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say, going on that, because you talked about Ryan Poles a little bit, when he introduced the press conference today, when he gave his opening statement, he looked like a kid who just got a PlayStation 5 for Christmas. He was smiling, a demeanor that we really haven't seen Ryan Poles use whenever talking to the public. And maybe I'm digging too deep into this, but whenever they asked Ben Johnson about how do you mean you're aligned? How does it mean that you're in lockstep with them? And he said, you'll have to ask the powers that be about that. Did that insinuate that they extended Ryan Poles with it by bringing Ben Johnson in, or am I just thinking way too deeply into this?
I mean, you would think they did. I mean, I don't know that that was what they were trying to communicate or not, but like, I don't know why you go into this process with that kind of instability lingering after there. And I think part of the smile for Ryan Poles is that even if they haven't given him that contract extension yet, like he knows that his job security is tied to the success of whoever he picks as head coach. And to feel like he got his favorite guy and seemingly everybody else's favorite guy, the number one choice here, like, we'll never be able to look back with hindsight and say, oh, man, the Bears should have hired this guy, because we should have known, like, at the time, that was clearly the better candidate, and the Bears didn't get that guy, like we do with Trestman and Bruce Arians, where we all wanted Bruce Arians, but they took Trestman, and we all go like, well, duh, they should have known better. There is no they should have known better at this point. Even if you wanted Mike Vrabel, right? Like, that wasn't an option for the Bears. That was never really an option for the Bears. So this was such a consensus pick that I think Ryan can sit here and feel like there's no questioning his decision here. Now, whether it works out or not is different, but there's no really questioning the process to get there.
You know, Lorin, you touched on the salary, right? That they gave out to Ben Johnson, right? I think he's like top 5 or top 8, something like that, in terms of NFL paid coaches already. And he hasn't even coached his first NFL game. And so obviously the financial commitment is there. But as I was watching this press conference today, it just felt to me, the more he spoke, Ben Johnson, it feels like he's got more say in this organization. Now, I'm not saying he's above Ryan Poles or he's looking to take Ryan Poles' job, but Ryan Poles is the general manager. He still contractually has the final say, if you will, on the roster. But I just feel like this is someone now that comes in and he's going to be, if you want to say, a partner with Ryan Poles in terms of building this roster. Did you get that same feeling listening to Ben Johnson today?
Yeah, I think so. That I think that's part of the appeal here, right? It's like he's going to come in. The Bears are going to kind of let him feel like, hey, you're in charge of this team, and we're going to do whatever you need, whatever it takes for you to be successful here. And I do think Matt Eberflus didn't come off that way, but Matt Eberflus had a pretty significant amount of control around here too. I mean, they got Eberflus's guys and guys that Eberflus would want for this team, guys that fit, what they thought fit the hits principle, and like, he had a lot to say over his coaching staff and stuff. Like, I think Poles was pretty hands off with Eberflus in that regard, maybe too hands off with Eberflus in that regard. And I think he's promising Ben Johnson a similar amount of like, hey, we have the same goal here. It doesn't need to be I'm right and you're wrong. It's like, no, we need what's best for this football team. So we're going to figure that out. And I think Ben has a lot of trust in that process and in that relationship with Poles to say he's not going to micromanage me or tell me what has to be done on my roster, because in a lot of ways, Ryan Poles needs Ben Johnson more than Ben Johnson needs Ryan Poles. Yep.
It's got a long contract.
Yeah.
Johnson got a longer contract than Ryan Poles.
And you talked about how Eberflus, they were going out and getting guys that fit his principle, and dozens. Obviously, in the first draft, they go out and they get Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker. With Ben Johnson in the room and Ben Johnson having some input on there, can we expect possibly a much different approach to the draft, especially with what their needs are along the offensive line and defensive line as well, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what they're able to do in free agency. I mean, I think definitely I want to see the offensive line addressed in both, a double up at every position. Give me a young guy and a veteran at every spot, because you just can't have too many of those. But I can see Ben Johnson coming in and saying, listen, like, I like a lot of this talent on offense, and I'm going to make sure this offense is good. So I better invest a little bit more in defense personnel-wise, just because, he's sure going to trust his defensive coordinator, but he's not coming in here for this team to have a strength on defense or to be that side of the ball to lean on. So maybe he says, yeah, Dennis Allen, whoever might need a little bit more support. So let me use that first round pick on a pass rusher, because that's going to make our offense better, or whatever that ends up looking like. Like, I think he's smart enough to see that he doesn't just need to build up his offense, that they need to, especially, with that first round pick, just get the best football players for the long term and not just where the immediate needs are on the roster right now. But if you can hit 2 birds with 1 stone, you might as well.
The in attendance today at the press conference, which was kind of surprising because I don't recall previous press conferences where players were there. Caleb Williams was there. DJ Moore left a family vacation, came in. Roma Dunze, Cole Kmet. Do we know, have we heard, were they told to come in by the Bears, or they just came on their own free will?
Yeah, I got the impression from Caleb Williams, his comments, that they came on their own free will, that this was guys who just wanted to be here and wanted to meet Ben Johnson, wanted to show their support and show that camaraderie. I mean, especially with DJ Moore leaving Disney and a family vacation, like that's not like I don't think they're allowed to require them to be there under an NFL rules there. But like, even if the like strongly suggest it, like this doesn't feel like a culture in a locker room beforehand that if the Bears were like, hey, it'd be really nice if you were there, are all those guys for sure, maybe those 4 guys in particular, but are a bunch of guys going to show up, or are they kind of like, oh, well, we don't really have to do that? Like, I think this is guys who are really, really excited. I just think the Bears were probably smart enough to say, okay, they reached out to players, said, who's coming? Oh, well, then we'll put you guys in the front row and have a nice camera shot that's got Caleb and DJ and Rome and Cole Kmet, like the 4 leaders of the offense. And I would bet there were other players there that just weren't sitting in the front row, but you got to put, the big faces in the front row and get some PR out of that too.
And Lorin, I'm going to ask you what you've learned about Ben Johnson. But first, we do have a quick soundbite of Caleb Williams talking about Ben Johnson and how he feels about the situation.
Extremely excited. When we called, it was Kevin, George, Ryan, and Ted all on the phone, and I kind of said thank you to all of them, and then once I got off the phone, I was driving on the highway, and I don't know if it was safe or not, but I gave out a loud yell and scream of just excitement, of just it brings a bunch of clarity to the off season. It brings a bunch of different things to the off season, and I'm really excited about obviously the Bears and this org and being able to make this happen and keep Ben Johnson as our coach for a long time.
Did he reach out to you Monday?
Yeah. We talked, and it was you can see the competitiveness in his eyes and the fire in his eyes, and it was really cool seeing that because it's actually the first time that we talked. I know after games, I tried to go find him and shake his hand at least. After our games and things like that, and I think he ran off. I think he knew it was better not to probably shake my hand after the game and in those moments. But yeah, no, I'm super excited for this organization and everything to come.
Now, I'm sure he had to confirm a few times to make sure he was actually talking to Ben Johnson this time, unlike the prank that got pulled on him here. But that's a story for another time. So that's what Caleb Williams feels about the situation. Now, Lorin, you spoke with Jeff Risdon, who covers the Lions, on your Locked On Bears show, I believe this morning. What did you learn about Ben Johnson from Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff is a really great resource on this. I mean, he talked a lot about how he's seen Ben Johnson as a leader at training camp and some of the stuff they start early in the season that builds up over the course of the year. But I think it was a combination of like him being ready for this head coaching job, but also like, yeah, the Lions offensive line has been really good pretty much his whole time there. And in the games when the offensive line plays more poorly or they have injuries up front, the offense struggles a little bit more. And there are times when Ben Johnson can maybe get a little bit too cute sometimes and try and do a little bit too much. Like I appreciated Jeff for being real about it, where it's not like he's not this mad Lions fan who's here to come in and say, here's all the bad things Ben Johnson would do. He talked about how great he was and how much of a revelation it's been for the Lions. But it's also, I think you get a lot of the Bears side of the perspective where it's like, oh, he is perfect. The offense has no flaws. They never did anything wrong in Detroit. And he's going to be an amazing head coach. It's like, yeah, there's a lot to like, and he's a really, really strong candidate, but he's got little things that you might not like along the way, or things to just keep an eye on how that transitions to Detroit, because it's a very different quarterback that he's going to be working with, and for now, very different personnel, especially on that O-line.
Yeah, one of the concerns I have, it's a minor concern. Obviously, the previous head coaching experience, that's something you have to always take into effect, depending how this is going to turn. But the way he's so far commanded the room, from yesterday's little, meet and greet at Head House Hall to today in terms of commanding that press conference, what was very impressive was the fact that he had no notes in front of him, right? First of all, there were no acronyms, there were no HITS principles or anything crap like that. That's a real positive right there. But the one thing I have, minor concern I have, and I wonder if you touched on this with Jeff, is he's never really gone through and developed a young quarterback. He's always been around veteran quarterbacks. Obviously, Jared Goff's a veteran quarterback. Other quarterbacks he had in Miami. I'm curious, does Jeff, or do you have any concerns or any kind of pushback saying, oh, well, let's see how he works with a young quarterback? I did love the fact that he said they're gonna break the offense down to the studs and kind of build it around Caleb. I've been wanting for someone to say that for years now. I do like that part of it, but just the fact that he's never worked with a young quarterback. Curious if Jeff or if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say that, I didn't talk to Jeff Risdon about that part specifically, but I think the feeling I get on that is that I don't know that it matters a ton how young the quarterback is when it comes to the guys he's been able to work with, because I think we saw how much better Jared Goff became when they added, the right kind of structure and the right kind of system around there that, whether you're a 30-year-old quarterback or a 25-year-old quarterback, like you're always going to be teaching them the same kind of things. And maybe one has a slightly more advanced foundational, knowledge when you first get to them. But like every offseason, you're working through fundamentals again, right? You kind of you're not starting from square one, but you're starting with the basics again every single time to just refresh a quarterback. And that I think Caleb is advanced enough. Like it'd be different if this was like Trey Lance coming out of college, where it's like, okay, this guy has 5 games of quarterbacking experience, and maybe you are really worried about how he can just like handle basic football information and stuff. But like, because Caleb's now in his second year and he's done a lot in college and he's worked with a lot of these professional coaches and quality quarterback coaches at that, like I'm not super worried about him being so young that Ben Johnson needs to like dumb things down to get down to his level to build him back up. Like I think you can kind of plug Caleb in more like a veteran quarterback of sorts, and maybe you start a little bit farther behind where Goff was. But I think just putting the system in place, like he can develop and grow with him along the way.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to know is because there's a lot of young talent on this offense. So, two-part question as far as what makes Ben Johnson's offense so innovative, and who might benefit the most from this change? We saw Cole Kmet struggle a little bit this year. We know Rome Odunze is probably going to want to take a step forward next year. Who might benefit from this new offensive scheme?
Yeah, so I think what makes it so effective is that we heard Ben Johnson talk about this a little bit. They can do a lot of different things well, and they can disguise things so that they look similarly, and that so the defense can't tell the difference between what you're running, but the offense knows the difference of what you're running, or vice versa. You can make it look different to the defense, so they think you're running something else, but really you're running the same thing, but the defense isn't able to guess because it looks different. So it simplifies the thinking for the players on the field. But then, part of that is just, they developed talent really well. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs is a special running back. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a special wide receiver. Like that, sometimes playmakers just make good plays too. But I think the ability to give some real structure to Caleb, have a foundation of a running game, getting under center, some play action off of that to open things up over the top can really be something that unlocks this offense a bit more. In terms of players who I think are really going to benefit from this, I mean, obviously Caleb is going to be at the top of that list there, but I think Cole Kmet in particular, to be put in an offense like this where, we've seen Ben Johnson to be great with TJ Hawkinson and then bring in Sam Laporta even as a rookie and have a lot of success with him. Like Cole Kmet has been such an underutilized asset in this offense. And I think his blocking ability and then with the receiving ability on top of that, like in the play action game, he's going to be so deadly because defenses are never going to really know what his job is going to be on the play. Even if he starts blocking, he might be able to slip out. And I think we're going to see that relationship develop quite a bit more. And then if they open up the deep shots, Rome Odunze is the one who I think is going to open up because DJ Moore is going to get his, and I'm sure DeAndre Swift and Roshan Johnson are going to get theirs. But I think you can really see the acceleration of Odunze's development and then Kmet getting back to playing more like Cole Kmet.
Yeah, the other aspect that I like about it, and that's the perfect thing you just said there, right? And the fact that he brought up John Shu in a Bear press conference and no one lost their mind was amazing, right? So because obviously John Shu was a big influence on him back in the days in North Carolina. The one thing he said, and John Shu kind of relayed the same thing, was make say things look different, do different things and make them look the same, and put defensive players in conflict, which I totally love about that. So that's something that I look forward to seeing this upcoming season. But in terms of his defensive side, I know Ryan Poles was quoted saying, they're not sure in terms of they're going to run a 4-3 or a 3-4. The rumor, Schefter tweeted out that Dennis Allen was the leading candidate. Obviously, if Schefter tweets it out, that typically happens. So I know there's a Rooney rule they have to follow in terms of getting or interviewing people from outside, the organization. I think Aubrey Pleasant was requested from the Rams. So, but do you think Dennis Allen will be the defensive coordinator, or have you heard any other names other than Aubrey Pleasant?
Yeah, I think Allen is definitely the name that is in plan A for Ben Johnson, right? To be able to bring in a coordinator who has head coaching experience is something Ryan Poles talked about at his end of season press conference. It's something Ben Johnson mentioned as something that could be an asset for him in this process. And he's kind of hinting at, Dennis Allen is the guy that they want to bring in. And I think that'd be a good hire for the Bears. I think despite his less than stellar win-loss record as a head coach, his defenses in New Orleans were really solid maybe not this last season as the talent was dropping off more and more as their salary cap issues became bigger and bigger, but they had like 4 or 5 straight years as a top 10 defense in New Orleans. He mixes things up in his fronts. Coverage wise, they're pretty variable, but we'll see a lot more man coverage in Chicago than we've seen in a long time. So I like the ability to put Jalen Johnson and Tyreek Stevenson on these guys a little bit more often. Like, I think that can all be a really fun part of this process. And from Ben Johnson's defensive evaluation process, I heard him in an interview, and he's done interviews now with like every radio station and TV station in Chicago. So I can't remember which one it was on, but he was asked about, preparing for the Bears and playing against them and how the running game popped off, because he mentioned specifically, like, I noticed as soon as Andrew Billings got hurt, this Bears run defense really started getting a lot more leaky. And I think it was because of that nose tackle. Billings was gone. He's such a key figure. Like, I think Johnson, having been an offensive guy who's scouting defense all the time, knows how to read defense. I mean, whether that means he can coach it and lead it properly is maybe a little bit of a different conversation, but he can recognize where key talent is, even when they're not necessarily, household names making the biggest bucks.
And speaking of, the defense and moving forward and not trying to look in the past too much, the lazy narrative amongst a lot of national analysts is, well, you guys got really excited about Matt Nagy and look what happened. You had a young quarterback and he was coming from the Andy Reid tree. And obviously, as people who watch the Bears, we know there are stark differences, but people on the outside are like, why are you getting so excited about this one when it failed so badly 6-7 years ago? What are the stark contrasts between this hire with Ben Johnson and the hire of Matt Nagy years ago?
Yeah, I think the two things that stand out for me there is, one, Matt Nagy had very little play calling experience at the time under Andy Reid. I think that we spent so much time back then trying to go through, okay, Andy Reid let him call plays for the second half of this game, or did he let him call plays in this week 18 or in the preseason there? And we kind of pieced together a little bit of play calling for Matt Nagy. So it wasn't as though Nagy came in as this perfectly, no questions asked, offense is going to be great mind. And there was a lot to like, and we definitely did like him at the time. That we're not going to go back and gaslight people into saying, oh, we knew Matt Nagy's offense wasn't going to work that well. But it wasn't as pristine of an offensive resume as Ben Johnson has done with the Detroit Lions. And then the other side of that is that Matt Nagy was always an Andy Reid guy and kind of only saw how the Andy Reid style of offense worked for the most part. I think he dabbled a little bit elsewhere, but was pretty much always doing what Coach Reid does, and then coming to Chicago and trying to do his own version of what Coach Reid does. But with Ben Johnson, it was Joe Philbin in Miami, and then Adam Gase in Miami, and then he worked under Darrell Bevell and Matt Patricia in Detroit, and then now Dan Campbell in Detroit. And like, some of those guys have some similar offensive backgrounds in terms of coaches they've worked under, but there's some different flavors in there. More of the Martz stuff with Gates versus more of the like Holmgren Sherman stuff with Philbin and with Dan Campbell. Like, he hasn't just said, like, this is the way we do it. I'm a Shanahan guy. I'm a McVay guy. I'm a Reid guy. He can take bits and pieces of everybody. And I think the thing that stood out for me from Ben Johnson in his press conference, he talked about how he's been on some good teams. He's been on some bad teams. And so he's learned what not to do just as much as what to do. And I feel like that was something somebody like Matt Nagy missed a little bit more because he mostly only saw how Andy Reid did it.
Right.
Absolutely. And we actually have a question from the chat room here. It comes from Lennox. Who are the top DC, OC, and special team possibilities? We talked about the defensive coordinator. So let's talk about potential offensive coordinators and special teams. I know Rizzy has been mentioned about special teams, and the offensive line coach from Detroit has been mentioned as OC, although that's kind of wavering back and forth now. Who are some possibilities at some of those high-level coaching positions?
Yeah, I can't say that I know a lot of special teams connections for Ben Johnson off the top of my head. I know there's, one of the guys from Detroit, from Miami that he worked with in the past, I think is out there and available. But as far as OC candidates, you obviously look across this Lions coaching staff, and there's multiple guys you would be interested in, right? Tanner Engstrand is their passing game coordinator, who they're kind of expecting Dan Campbell will promote to OC there. But, probably the opportunity to call plays there would be more intriguing than what Chicago is. But if not him, their quarterbacks coach, Mark Brunell, obviously the former quarterback in football, he's been with Detroit for a handful of seasons now and has coached it not in the NFL at other spots, but has been in coaching a little bit longer before that. And you can even throw in there like wide receivers coach Antoine Randall L. I mean, a lot of guys, a lot of former players on that staff that are not just like off the street former players who you have to teach them how to coach. Like, they've been doing it now for a little while. And I like the idea of getting guys Ben Johnson has worked with, as opposed to the Matt Eberflus approach when he was building his offense. And it was like, we'll take Luke Getsy from over here and Andrew Janocko from over here and Chris Morgan from over here. And none of these guys
are Chris Armstrong clients. That's why.
Well, because they're all the same agent, yeah. But they never worked together. So it was like they were trying to form an offensive identity from a bunch of different cooks in the kitchen. And I just want that the magic word of the day has been alignment, right? In this coaching staff on offense and defense. Give me a defensive coordinator he's worked with before, or at least he's got real connections to. I don't know if he worked with Dennis Allen specifically, but real connections to, and guys he knows on offense, so that you can have some real cohesion there and not coaches trying to figure each other out while they're also trying to figure players out. Is too much going on at one time.
And it doesn't hurt to have a former head coach on your staff to kind of usher you into what to expect on maybe not stuff on the field, but outside of the field. Here's what can you expect from the media. Here's what you expect as far as people reaching out to you, or here's what some of the responsibilities outside of football, happen, or anything else that you might need to lean on. It'd be nice to have a former head coach there on the staff. Lorin, one more question before we get you out of here. This comes from Vizzo Joe. It says, Ben Johnson mentioned tearing down the offense to the studs. What does that consist of compared to his offense that he ran in Detroit? Is that more of a Caleb thing or a system thing?
That's more of a Caleb thing, right? Jared Goff and Caleb Williams are quite different styles of quarterback, and I think that's what Ben's getting at there, right? Goff is a lot more statuesque comparatively, and a guy who, like, the MO on Goff all the time before the Lions got great was like, oh yeah, if you just get pressure on Jared Goff, he crumbles. Like, kind of like Kirk Cousins. It was like, yeah, if he's got a clean pocket, he's going to do great, but if you get the guy under pressure, his ability to improvise and do much else out of structure just wasn't going to work very well. And that's obviously kind of the opposite of Caleb Williams in that regard. So like, the Lions asked Jared Goff to be a pretty quick rhythm, not all 3-step drops, but kind of like Tua in Miami, right? Like, let's get rid of the ball quickly. Let's make sure you don't have to hold on it super long unless we're trying to let something develop downfield, and then we'll leave in extra blockers. But they want more precision from Jared Goff. And while Caleb can do some of that, that's not necessarily his best strength. There is, 3-step drop, fire in there and throw the tight windows. Like, let him open some things up and fire the ball downfield a little bit more, be a playmaker. So I think that's where Ben Johnson's talking about going down the studs, where it's like, okay, maybe in Detroit they had some go-to 3-step drop, hey, slant route here, hey, quick curl route here. Let's just, these 4 rhythm plays were Jared Goff's favorite plays to get going. And for Caleb, maybe that's going to look a little bit different. It's a shallow cross here, or it's a rollout there, or whatever it is, to say you're going to have those plays to get him in rhythm, but it's not going to be the same plays Jared Goff preferred. It's going to be more Caleb's flavor from the same playbook. They'll run a lot of the same plays, but it's sort of the preferences there and the go-tos that will be torn down more to the studs and rebuilding what you kind of put on your play sheet in which spot.
Right. And that's not a big difference from him and Nagy. What was right? Nagy brought the KC book and said, all right, here, I want to fit Mitch Trubisky into this offense. It didn't fit for Mitch Trubisky. And here he's like, I'm not bringing a Detroit offense. I'm going to build it what Caleb wants to do. That's one thing that I loved about this press conference when he said that today.
And Lorin, I actually lied. I do have one more question because it's coming up in the chat room a lot. Danny, you're going to talk about all the draft prospects and what the Bears can go after. But Lorin, Ryan Poles did allude to free agency a little bit. And so obviously Ben Johnson specifically stressed the need for the offensive line. This is a question from Berlissimo. Where do you see that priority in free agency? Do you have any names of free agents that the Bears might go after, or what would be your wish list, or best case scenario for the Bears in free agency?
Yeah, I think when it comes to free agency, there's no such thing as too much on the offensive line specifically, right? Like, if that means Trey Smith from the Kansas City Chiefs getting a $21 million a year, go for it. Like, you cannot overdo it on this offensive line. I want to address every position I would sign a free agent for. I mean, maybe, you bring back Matt Pryor as a swing backup offensive lineman, but like, I want a new starting left guard, right guard, and center, and I want more competition at tackle. So go out and get guys at every spot. And people will point out, Kevin Zeitler, the Lions guard, is entering free agency. And I know, like, a lot of the names people throw out there, like Zach Martin from the Cowboys, or even Brandon Scherf from the Jaguars, Ronnie Stanley from the Ravens, like, they're older guys. And some people say, well, do you want to sign this old offensive lineman in free agency? And it's like, yes, give me the old offensive lineman and then draft a guy to pair with him so that you get 1 or 2 years out of Zeitler, or you get 1 or 2 years out of, Ronnie Stanley or Zach Martin or whoever it is. And then you've got the rookie behind them. Then you don't feel like you have to use a 1st round pick. Or you don't feel like you have to use even a 2nd round pick there. Like, you can get a guy in the 3rd or 4th round. You don't have to rush him out there. I do think generally it's a weaker center group in free agency. So again, an older guy like Ryan Kelly from the Colts. I mean, these are not guys that you think are like, wow, they're going to come in and be Pro Bowl players, but just like veteran consistency with younger options behind them, I think can go a long way.
Excellent. Well, Lorin, we appreciate you taking some time to talk to us. Before we get you out of here, can you tell our fans about Locked On Bears and all the other things you're working for, how they can connect with you, how they can see your stuff?
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you having me on. Happy to do it anytime. You can hear me 5 days a week on the Locked On Bears podcast, out every day. It's 30 minutes of all the biggest Bears stories of the day and analysis on what it means for the team. It's on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can read my writing over on Sports Illustrated's Bears Vertical, and you can follow me on Twitter at Cox Sports One as Aldo comes in with the graphic at literally the perfect time.
That's what we do. We're all about timing here. Lorin Cox, friend of the show, we appreciate you being on. Come back anytime. We're going to have a lot more Buffone 55 with Danny and Aldo jumping in for me right after these messages.
The Bears.
Because of the way they play the nickel corner here, and the nickel corner plays 88-85% of the snaps. He's got to be like part linebacker.
The Bears.
When you're in a scouting room, there's going to be differences of opinion.
The Bears.
Well, you're looking at traits, and he tested very, very well.
The Bears.
Greg, why are teams wrong on quarterback evaluation so often?
Number one, it's a hard position to evaluate.
Former Bears scouting director Greg Gabriel talks football live every week on the Barroom Network. Also available on demand.
Thank you, John Buffone. Thank you, Lorin Cox. Great half hour of football talk, and everybody in the chat room recognizes it as well. Aldo, great discussion, excellent. J-Rock, I'm not going to put that up. Oh, man, you son of a gun. Stop it. Anyway, I am happy to spend the next 30 to 60 minutes talking ball with Danny Shimon. I got a lot of tape from today's press conference to share with you. And Danny, before I play this soundbite of Coach Johnson talking about the discipline needed and the culture, what did you get overall about Coach Johnson's feeling about taking care of issues in the locker room when they pop up?
Well, it was as if he was told that was something that was, brought up a lot by these former players, by the players about the former regime. And I think that's something that obviously the media was stressed on too as well. And that was the thing, remember we were talking about in terms of his presence, right? I wanted to see how he would react. Last time we got on a quick podcast, and I said, I don't want to see any coach speak. I don't want to see any acronyms and all that stuff, goofy stuff. I want to see him not look nervous at all. And for me, he was a little emotional in the beginning, I think, to kind of talk about thanking his family and all the people who's helped him along the way, Dan Campbell and all that stuff. But I think once he got to talk about football, again, no notes. There was nothing in front of him. This is all coming off the top of his head, from his heart. That was really impressive. I mean, he caught the attention of the entire room. So some of the, not entirely alleviated, but some of the concerns I had in terms of can he control the room? Can he control a 53-man roster? Those are alleviated for me. I think this guy can come out there, he can talk ball, he's educated, he's smart, and I think once you show players that you can help them get better and you have a plan for them, I think that's only going to make them fall for and kind of run through the wall for them, if you will. But in terms of the culture, I think he kept saying, we have a standard. We're going to set a standard. We as coaches are going to be the initial ones to lay out the rules, lay out the standards. This is what we expect. This is how we want every single player to conduct themselves, and this is how the Chicago Bears are going to be. Then once we become a veteran team, the veteran players will take over that, and that role and kind of police the locker room and police the culture and make sure that culture continues to, permeate throughout the organization. So I think he comes in and says, all right, I'm going to lay the law down. You guys follow me. And then once we become a veteran team and we're good and the culture's good, I'll hand it over to you guys.
I got the same sense, and Ben Johnson has to deal with the DJ Moore problem. It's no secret now throughout the league. We saw it on Chris Long's podcast, him mentioning DJ Moore's behavior. He's got to have a sit down with him face to face. He's got to address the issues that Cole Kmet made public about players potentially not doing that extra rep when they're on their own and cheating the system. And of course, it was widespread news about Jalen Johnson's blow up, and it just all disintegrated for the Chicago Bears in a terrible way. And I don't think we can blame Matt Eberflus 100% for that. The players have to be accountable. And this is what Coach Johnson said to the players that were there.
I do have a message here for the players. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. The bar has been set higher than it's ever been set before. The only way for this team and for you as individual players to reach your potential is to be pushed and to be challenged. And that's exactly what I and my staff plan on doing. We are going to push, we're going to challenge. And along with those high standards, there's also going to be a high level of support as well. Everybody in this building is going to be all about helping you guys out. How do you become the best versions of yourselves? That's what it's going to be about from start to finish. When you walk in, it'll be crystal clear, the communication, the structure, and the consistency. And that will never waver. Our mission starting this spring is to win and to win now.
Danny, let me add one.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no,
I'm
go
saying
ahead.
communication, structure, and discipline. Those are the things that are missing under the Matt Eberflus regime, right? And that's what he's going to instill right now. And he said, he goes, it's going to start from day one, and he wants to win. He's not coming in here to say, we're going to take a year and 2 years to put my system in, blah, blah, blah. We are expecting to win next year. And that is something that, he kind of put a bullseye on his back, if you will, saying, I love the talent here, and I think we can win next year. So here we go.
Indeed. I want to add one more soundbite to that kind of culture of discipline. This was very telling.
Clear communication and structure and expectation. And that's really what we're going to outline. We will set the standard in terms of what it looks like, what it should look like, what it shouldn't look like. Anytime it's not hitting that standard and that mark, it'll be us as on us as the coaching staff to call guys out, and repeat offenders will have to continue to be made an example of.
See, I bet you, Aldo, you hear that clip, you think DJ Moore. See, I hear that clip, I think Tyreek Stevenson.
Don't know. That's totally fair. Totally fair. I'm just a little bit more disappointed with DJ because he was a captain. He's a veteran. And, you expected him to take Caleb under his wing and support him instead of throwing out body language that wasn't the support to his quarterback. With Tyreek, I think we all knew coming out of University of Florida, was it? He had that temperament. Miami. He had that temperament. And so, I wasn't surprised at all to see him, lose it a couple of times this past season. Bellissimo has a thought. I get the feeling Ben Johnson came in with a shopping list for the O-line to get me these guys. Totally agree that he knows the offense isn't going to run unless you got an offensive line, right, Danny?
Right, exactly. And that's something I've been harping on for years. You got to build from the inside out. If your offense and defensive line suck, your team's going to suck. Simple as that. That's football. Don't make it overcomplicated and all that stuff. So I think they're going to attack. The good news is, like I said, I think he's going to have say in terms of, the personnel he's going to bring in here. And it's something that I did give Ryan Poles some leeway for some of the decisions he's made in the past, because I do believe he does give his coach and his coaching staff, an ear and allows them to go ahead and pick guys and bring guys in. I'm pretty sure, and I don't know 100%, but I'm thinking that, Tremaine Edmonds was a guy that he wanted, right? Like that the Eberflus wanted. Some of the other guys that he brought in were some of the guys Eberflus wanted. So I do have a feeling here that Ben Johnson's going to have a much bigger say in personnel, and I think he's going to work with Ryan Poles. Hey, listen, I need this guy, I need this kind of guy, I need this kind of guy. So that's the thing. If we kind of go and take a look at what they had in Detroit, we're talking about bigger, more stout offensive linemen at the point of attack. I think we're going to talk about guys like obviously guys like Frank Ragnow and Penei Sewell are not out there in free agency, but you got to go ahead and got to fill some holes here, and then and bring guys in to develop in terms of young guys behind them. So I think you do go get 2 or 3 offensive linemen in free agency. Do you go blow your entire cap on 1 or 2 players? We'll see, because there's some needs on the defensive line as well. So, but I do think they're going to attack the offensive line aggressively, draft and free agency. And I think they're going to attack some players there on defense as well. So I'm really curious to see if they are going to make this Dennis Allen hiring at DC official. I think that's once he's in there, then we'll know for sure in terms of what kind of players they're looking for on defense as well.
Well, on ESPN Radio, he was interviewed on one of their shows, and this is what he volunteered about the offensive line and defensive line.
Listen, I'll sit down with Ryan, and and we'll go through the roster player by player here as things start to settle down. But yeah, I don't think it was a secret last year that the O-line play was not quite where it needed to be, and so we'll look at why that was the case, and if it was personnel driven, where we need to look to upgrade, and same thing on the defensive line. Here's what I'll tell you is, in 2023, that defensive line was playing really good football, and last year they got a little bit leaky in terms of stopping the run.
Mm-hmm.
I felt as an opposing coach that the Billings loss was a big deal. Him not being out there, he gave us trouble. He gave us trouble lining up at that nose guard spot, and I do think that might have had something to do with the defense being a little bit leakier here this year.
What do you think about that, Billings, and him detecting the loss of Billings?
I agree 100%. I mean, Billings was having a great year. Stat wise, he wasn't jumping off the stat page, but he was making his presence felt week in and week out. And that loss was huge. And obviously, once they lost him, that run defense was never the same. A young guy like Zach Pickens, I expected him to kind of step up, and he really didn't have that good of a second year. So we'll see how that goes there. But the one good thing is, if Dennis Allen is a defensive coordinator, they have a similar 4-3 front. They have 4 guys like one gap, penetrate, get upfield. I think that kind of plays right into the Montez Sweats, the Gervon Dexters, even as Zach Pickens, but you got to add some reinforcements there as well. I mean, maybe get another edge guy opposite of Montez Sweat, but I do like that. And the coverage wise with Dennis Allen plays a lot of plays some one safety back there, one high safety. Sometimes we see a lot of 3 safeties back there. So different coverages, mixes it up. So another thing that he did, I don't know which interview it was, but he was Ben Johnson was very, very complimentary of Kyler Gordon. Calling him one of the better nickel, in the league, So I think that's it's called players right there. Just you can tell that from him playing the Bears defense twice a year, he's got some recollection in terms of guys that have impressed him on tape. So that's always a positive. And now he's going to go get a defensive coordinator. Hopefully that fulfills and gets those guys into spots to continue to get better.
I want to thank Jason Toy for his $5 donation, and he asked, "Who do you think Ben Johnson will acquire for his coaching staff and players? Plus, who might he let go?" That's an interesting question, particularly the let go, because in terms of picking up players, we have to learn more about how he's going to run the offense and defense. But in terms of letting people go, does any name come to your mind immediately, Danny, that their job might be in jeopardy, even if they're not having an expiring contract in March?
Well, I mean, Keenan Allen, I think is the easiest, low-hanging fruit there. I think he's going to be someone that they're going to go and let go. For me, defensively, I think obviously I mentioned it last night. I think Tremaine Edmonds is a guy that could see himself out here on this defense. Now, I know he did mention him as one of the players that they noticed on tape as well. But I just think that's somewhere, depending on the contract, I don't know what the cap savings or hit would be if they cut. I think that's a guy that could find himself out of a job. And relocating some of that money onto another position on defense. Safety. Jaquan Brisker. That's still a question mark. I know they've said in the end of season press conference, Cole said that he's back to being normal self, but that's a scary thing where they missed half a season because of a concussion, right? And then obviously Kevin Byard, I think had a solid season as a veteran, but he's on a 1-year contract. Are they going to go ahead and replace him or bring him back in a 1-year deal? Replace him with a more younger guy, in free agency. So those are a couple of names on defense that kind of stuck out to me. Offensively, obviously, the entire, the interior of the offensive line, I think, are all going to be different. I think Tevin Jenkins is gone. I think the centers are gone. Obviously, I think Matt Pryor might be gone. He's on a 1-year deal as well. So I think that's going to be the wholesale changes there. And you do have to go out and add a little bit of a vertical speed element to this offense, right? So I think that'd be a position, whether it's in the draft or whether it's in free agency, you got to add some guy that can stretch the field vertically and challenge defenses. This offense was very horizontal, a lot of east-west terms of passing game and running game. I think now with him, you're going to have to go ahead and do that and I also think they're going to have to bring in another running back. I think, DeAndre Swift, his status on the roster could be something in jeopardy, or they could just bring in another guy that can be more of that in between, downhill runner type, that like a David Montgomery, for example. So, there are some spots there that they're going to go and add, but also another flex tight end, a guy that can complement, Cole Kmet. We've been calling for that for a couple of years now. And I think you could see him coming in and maybe, helping Cole Kmet, bringing another talented, guy, more of a, not an inline blocker like a Kmet, more of a guy who can split out wide and kind of line up in the slot and help stretch the seam there as well. So I think you're going to see some vertical options being added to the offense, along with cleaning up that interior offensive line and a in-between tackle downhill running back.
Thank you, Jason. He says, great answer. Thank you for your donation as well. Lots of great questions are coming in. If you see my eyes darting from left to right, it's because I'm keeping an eye on the chat room and also paying attention.
I just figured you should say no. You don't agree with my answer.
No, I don't, and I don't have a nervous condition that causes that. So we're going to get to a lot of those questions as the conversation goes on. I want to share another soundbite. Somebody asked if Ryan Poles spoke at the press conference, and I love the way they structured the press conference. Ryan Poles had a minute, and then he introduced the new head coach. He spoke for 30 minutes, and then the feed was over, but reporters were then allowed to ask questions to Caleb, Ryan Poles, George McCaskey, and Kevin Warren. And again, congratulations. Kevin Warren did a great job, but man, does that guy sound like a used car salesman in many, many respects. Now, Kevin was asked about the amount of money that they're investing in the head coach. This is what he said.
I joke with George that probably if we did some study, we're probably related multiple generations ago. I'm fiscally conservative, but I am also aggressive, and I also believe in being creative, and I also believe that you get what you pay for. And so this is a situation where we needed to make sure we got the number one candidate, and it's not about the number one candidate. It was the number one candidate for the Chicago Bears, and all the other financial issues. Those are things we just have to be smart, with our money and make good decisions. And when things work out well, no one ever talks about the finances. And so it's up to us to make sure that we hire good assistant coaches. We got a world-class head coach. We have world-class players, and we need to make sure that we honor our way to say thank you to George Halas and what he has built here in the McCaskey family is to be successful.
How about thanking us fans? Come on, man. Right. And he was asked about fan reaction, and he says, I don't pay attention to fan reaction, which really bothered me. I've been very critical of George McCaskey, especially lately, but one of the great things that he does is he goes out, shakes hands, listens to people, returns emails, and so forth. And that's important. And if Kevin is truly accurate when he says, he doesn't pay attention to fans, then shame on you. You got to talk to the fan. They're the consumer. In essence, we are the stockholders of this company that you run. Because if we don't spend money on all this crap, you are going to be out of a job. And so, but again, do you get the sense that the Bears are really going to start investing big dollars? They got like $2 billion that they say they're going to spend on a stadium. They're spending money on a head coach like they never have before. Big contracts are available, maybe hopefully coming this offseason. What are your thoughts about the money aspect with the Bears?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are, Aldo, and this is what, going back to last year, I forgot when it was. I said Kevin Warren is my only hope right now, right? That's the only guy that's a difference from what we had from before, and I think we've seen it. I think we've seen it, and even the smaller things, right? Well, first of all these SVPs and EVPs, that's one thing on the business side. He spent money; they've already invested a lot there. But the little things like renting a jet, getting these coaching candidates via jet, not putting them on a coach airplane and flying them in O'Hare and all that stuff. That's what professional organizations do, and I think this is part of the Kevin Warren effect. Going out and Ben Johnson's getting, if the reports are true, if he's getting $13 million a year, he's already like top 6, top 7 in terms of highest paid coaches in the NFL. He's making more than like Sean McDermott, who's playing and he was coaching in the AFC Championship game coming up this week. And I think some other couple big name coaches were behind, Ben Johnson. So that's putting money, behind their head coach. Now, if they go ahead and invest into his staff and he bring in Dennis Allens and some of the other, these highly touted and well thought of assistant coaches to build that super staff around Ben Johnson, which is something that Ryan Poles had identified in terms of one of the mistakes he made with Matt Eberflus was, putting a first-time head coach with inexperienced coaching staff around them. Bring in guys that have been head coaches before as defensive coordinator, and maybe as a quarterback, offensive coordinator, whatnot, and getting these guys to help, help Ben Johnson through. And he mentioned this, today. He's going to build a great staff that he's going to be able to delegate, because a lot of the stuff he can't do, and he's going to delegate to his offensive coordinator a lot of the preparation, all that stuff for game plans and weekly stuff like that. So I do believe him when he said, he says he's going to invest, and I think that the proof in the pudding is in the coach, some of the way they're handling some of their business ventures, and I think also in terms of we'll see how the staff comes together and who they bring in, and how much they pay them. So I do believe that, and that stadium is going to get built, whether it's built in your backyard there in Arlington Heights or built here on the city. It's going to get built, and that's going to provide millions and millions of dollars for the Bears organization. So they have more money coming in. So, I mean, money is not a problem for them, right? So I think spend, and I think going back to the fans, the way I took his comment, not that he doesn't care about what the fans say. I think he felt more like some of the negative stuff that he'd been hearing, that if they put a winning product on the field, that the fans will be happy. I think that's what he was trying to refer. Again, maybe I'm running too much into his comments, but if they put a winning product with a great coach, good players on the football field, and they win, and McCaskey kind of echoed the same thing, the fans will be happy.
All right, staying along those same lines about money, Vizzo Joe had this question for you. If Trey Smith, the left guard of the Kansas City Chiefs, becomes a free agent, do you think Ryan Poles goes all in, since Smith played with Wright at Tennessee? Do you think he might, stretch the budget a little bit by bringing a talented young left guard and have him and Wright as fixtures in the offensive line for the next 10 years?
Joe, not only that, he helped draft Trey Smith when he was in KC. So he was
good point.
For KC back then. That's all. So I mean, there's a relationship there with Trey Smith and Ryan Poles, and I think he fits in this scheme in terms of the offensive line he wants to build in front of Caleb. So yeah, I mean, it's going to cost money. Does he hit the free agency market? Now I know the Chiefs are going for a three-peat. They are up against the cap there a little bit. So whether they go ahead and extend Trey Smith, we'll see. But if he hits the open market, that's by far, I have that list here of free agents. He's by far the best interior offensive lineman out there on the free agent market at only 26 years old. So you're getting him at his prime age there. Obviously the reason why he dropped in the 5th round was coming out of Tennessee. I had him as a 2nd round pick in terms of my grades coming out of Tennessee. I loved the kid, Trey Smith, coming out of Tennessee, but he had blood clots, and that was an issue. A lot of teams weren't passing him on some of the medicals, so that's something he dealt with. Obviously, he's been able to get over that. I don't know his medical information. I'm assuming everything's gonna be cleared and all that stuff. But 26 years old, a multi-time Pro Bowl guard, fills a position of need, and right away you tell your team, you tell your quarterback, hey, we're investing in you and we're going to protect you. You couple a Trey Smith with another center, a Dahlman or Ryan Kelly from for example from Indy. You got a veteran center in there as well. Now you got 2/3 of that interior fix. You can go maybe pluck a guy from 2nd or 3rd tier free agency, or even the draft another guard position. Bring in some depth behind your tackles. Now you got the makings of a nice offensive line there.
Good stuff. Let me go to another soundbite. Ben Johnson talked about coming to the Chicago Bears, and he was asked about what the influence was because the Bears have Caleb Williams. This is Coach Johnson.
It's clear that modern football in the NFL is quarterback driven. That is no secret. You can look at analytics. Right now, quarterback success is a higher predictor of winning and losing than turnover ratio, which it's been for 20 plus years. Okay, that's changed. So there's no doubt Caleb played a large component into my decision. He is a phenomenal talent that had, as many quarterbacks do, an up and down rookie year. This offense will be calibrated with him in mind We're going to build this thing. This is not simply a dropping of a previous playbook down on the table and starting there. Nope. We're ripping this thing down to the studs, and we're going to build it up with him first and foremost, and then with the pieces around him next.
I love that. I love that.
Right?
I've been asking for that back when Justin Fields was here. Let's bring someone that's building offense around what you have here. And when I heard that, I was like, finally, we have someone who gets it, right? You're not going to just bring in a Detroit playbook. All right, bam, this is what you're going to do. No, Caleb, what do you like to do? What are you good at? What do you not like to do? For example, and now we're going to build the offense around you. And now we're going to build it, in terms of the weapons you have on the outside. The one thing, you kept saying, and whenever I previewed some of the, these coaches that they were available, Ben Johnson was always one or two for me because of the fact that he relies on the run game. He devises everything off of the run. There's a lot of play action. He talks about putting players in defensive players in peril. Holding them there with the play action and giving your quarterback an ability to kind of hit behind them in terms of routes. Over the top or right behind the second level of the defense. I love that about him. I love the fact that that's how his philosophy is. He's not a West Coast guy. He's not a Shanahan, a wide zone guy. He's a guy that you'll see in terms of the blocking scheme. You'll see inside zone. You'll see some power. You'll see some counter. You'll see some wide zone. But he mixes and matches it to the strength of his players on offense. And I absolutely love that. The one thing I do disagree, I take homage with was the turnover thing. It's still. If you have turnovers, right? You just had 5 turnovers in that playoff game against the Commanders, and you end up losing. Turnovers to me are still a big key to winning and losing in NFL. So I have a little bit of an issue there, but everything else he says, I absolutely loved.
Well, I understood what he means, though, that by the numbers, it's now quarterback performance. And when you talk turnovers, 99% of the time it's the quarterback committing the turnover, right? Maybe not 99%, but a high percentage of turnovers are because the quarterback either fumbles or is intercepted and so forth. So I could kind of understand perhaps the data that he has is proven. I'm going to do some research on that because I'm really, really interested on the analytics and how he uses the analytics. And when I can't pronounce the gentleman's name who was head of the analytics department for the Chicago Bears, but he was fired 3 days ago. And you know it's because Ben Johnson was already kind of locked in and he wants to bring in his own guy. Yeah. Yep. You talked about running the ball, and Lennox, again, being very, very generous with his tips. He asked, can Roschon Johnson be used like Montgomery in Chicago? I wondered about that too. Is this a poor man's Roschon Johnson, DeAndre Swift towards Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery? Can it be that?
Not to me. I think Roschon, is a good serviceable backup running back, but in terms of like Montgomery's, someone like that, I don't think he's at that level. He's a good back, and I'm not saying, I'm not trying to poo-poo Roschon's abilities, but Montgomery and his ability to his vision, his balance, his contact balance, I think is superior to what Roschon Johnson has displayed. So again, are you going to give him a shot? Sure. Is he going to make the roster? Sure. But in terms of going and getting someone that's a caliber of a Dan Montgomery, I think you can do better than Roschon Johnson.
Indeed. All right. My confidence in Roschon has taken a hit, and I think this draft, which is really loaded with running backs, you can bring in a guy who, you can't bring in 2 running backs and expect them to replace Roschon and DeAndre, but you can bring one of them a running back to replace one of them. So I'm going to throw this name out. I know you're going to poo-poo it, but if Cam Scatterboo runs a 40 that is at least under 4.6, then I would consider him in that David Montgomery role, although you got to check into his concussion history and so forth. But a power back, and this draft offers some power backs that could be interesting. Any names come to the top of mind in terms of running backs that could fit the David Montgomery role?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, Cam Scatterbo, I love the kid too, but I mean, in terms of this running back class is loaded. You're talking about a guy like Omarion Hampton from North Carolina, like Quinton Allen from Syracuse. These are some of the guys that, right. Judkins hasn't announced from Ohio State if he's coming out yet or not. I like him a lot too as well. Trayvon Henderson from Ohio State also is someone that you can probably fill it into that Montgomery role, if you will. Also a pretty good pass catcher out of the backfield too. So I mean, there's some good running backs in this draft, and maybe you don't fill it and get your Jamar Gibbs, if you will, in this draft, but you can bring in a guy that, like you said, can complement things that DeAndre Swift does and can give you some of that in between the tackles, downhill running ability. Maybe a guy you can pluck in the third round, for example. So again, this is a draft in which running backs you can get in day 3. Tight ends too, you can get in day 3 of this draft, day 2, day 3 of this draft as well. So look for that position to possibly be filled here later on day 2 or day 3 of the draft.
Getting really excited. All right, so a lot of questions have been asked about who could he bring in for coordinator roles, for assistant coaches. No names, of course, were disclosed. The names that you are hearing are just scuttlebutt on social media, but he did give a clue as to the importance of bringing in somebody who knows how to do stuff, because he, as a rookie head coach, will need to learn a lot. Listen to Coach Ben Johnson.
Experience, whether it's coordinators or elsewhere within the coaching staff, will be important to me. And that's why I look forward here after we get through this initial madness, if you will, we can get going on the coaching staff. That's going to be a critical part of our success. They will be able to help guide and show me the way. The good news is this, is I'm not coming necessarily from a program that has solely won for the last 10 years. What I've seen in my time in the NFL, 7 years in Miami, 6 years in Detroit, is as much not good as I've seen good. And so there are a number of things that I've experienced and I've seen that should help throw the red flag up and help me avoid those potential pitfalls.
Experience is, of course, one of the things that I believe that is under appreciated, perhaps, is Matt Nagy's first year having Vic Fangio there. Yeah. I mean, I gotta somehow convince Mike North that we didn't go to the playoffs because of Mitch Trubisky. We went because of Vic Fangio and his defense. And Matt Nagy had a good year in that rookie season where he had the trick plays. And it wasn't a great play calling. I think we started to detect some of the problems with Nagy's play calling even in his rookie season. But, there's just having that veteran voice on the coaching staff, and especially if it sounds like a Vic Fangio, is going to be a great aid to everybody, isn't it?
Right, and at that point, Vic Fangio had never become a head coach, and so now imagine if you bring in a guy like the name keep hearing is Dennis Allen, right, for a defensive coordinator, former head coach, can kind of help you that, Darren Rizzi, I'm really excited about if they get him for special teams. I know between Chicago and Miami if he doesn't get the Saints head coaching job. So another guy that's been a interim head coach, so the one guy that I'm not hearing the name of is Thomas Brown, and I know maybe there could be a role there for Thomas Brown in Ben Johnson's offense, but that's one other guy. Obviously, he's been a coach. Ben has a relationship with Caleb, so we'll see how that goes. But in terms of offensive coordinator, Hank Fraley was a guy I was really, really hoping that he'd be able to pluck away from Detroit. You can come in here, coach the offensive line, be your offensive coordinator. You trust him. But it sounds like he might be either staying in Detroit or possibly taking the Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator position role there. So we'll see what happens there. But, Antoine Randall, a former, player in the league, former, local kid here from Chicago, who's a receivers coach at Detroit, could be a name that you could see come here as offensive coordinator. Mark Brunell, Lorin mentioned Mark Brunell. He's a former, obviously NFL quarterback. He's also a guy that, is a quarterback's coach now with Detroit. So there's another name that Lorin mentioned. I forgot, but I think that guy's going to be promoted to offensive coordinator in Detroit. So that's probably not going to be Engstrom. I think is his last name. So I think he's going to stay there. But In terms of, some other names, you've heard some crazy names. Obviously, this is where all the names get thrown on. And I've even heard like Dan Orlovsky from ESPN, like he's into getting coaching and get back and get into coaching, field. And, he's a possibility in one of these, not saying specifically for the Bears, but possibly one of these other, coaching hires. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, bringing in someone with experience, someone who's been a former head coach, I think will be huge for Ben Johnson. That kind of help take some of the pressure off him, kind of give him, hey, a heads up, hey, some of the pitfalls here that you could be heading here as a first-time head coach. You might want to take a look out for that as well. And the fact that both Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson has mentioned the fact that he wants someone that's got head coaching experience, that he's going to value someone with head coaching experience on the staff. It only makes me feel good that they're going to go out there and actually look for someone with that experience.
Yeah, Cliff says, Danny, think about it. Which job is best for Fraley? Detroit just lost their coaches. Seattle, really? And Bears with Ben Johnson to continue to mentor him. Yeah, I think that the Bears is the best job for him, but he might be looking at this. Perhaps Fraley wants to be a head coach. And
right.
So, there might be a better opportunity to advance that way with a different club. I don't know.
And he wants play calling responsibilities is my guess, right? He's not going to have it here with Ben Johnson. He's going to help design the weekly game plans. He's going to be the right hand man for Ben Johnson, and he'll be the offensive coordinator in title. But his main role is going to be working with the offensive line. Is my assumption. If he came here, Seattle, or even in Detroit, if he gets promoted, he's going to be their play caller, right? Because they both have Seattle's defensive minded head coach. The offense is going to be totally Hank Fraley. If he goes there as offensive coordinator, he's going to be calling plays. That's going to be his offense. In Detroit, Dan Campbell, obviously, he has called plays previously as a interim head coach in Miami, but that's not his forte. I think what he'll do is if Fraley stays there, he'll be the play caller there in Detroit. So here he'll come in and he'll help the offensive line and be the offensive coordinator, but he's not going to be the play caller.
Indeed. He's had great success utilizing the tight end at Detroit. We know Sam Laporta is one of the best. He's helped make him one of the best in the game. So Tom is asking, how can we expect Ben Johnson to use Cole Kmet? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Laporta is a good example. I mean, he's a Y inline tight end, a guy that can line up and block and also then release. So I think you'll see some more of Cole Kmet in terms of in the passing game, some more involvement of Cole Kmet in the passing game. I mean, these past year, I mean, there were games where 3-4 games he had no targets. And I don't know why you have a athlete like Cole Kmet where he had no targets whatsoever in the game. So I think that's going to change. And I do think that he does need someone that can complement him, right? We talked about this draft is deep in terms of bringing guys that could be that, Y or joker position tight end where you can split them out wide and be a nice passing complement to a Cole Kmet. So I do expect tight end production to kind of tick up with Ben Johnson. Remember, he was a former tight ends coach in Miami, and he was also in Detroit as well. So he's coached these guys, so he'll probably be able to get a little more coaching for Cole Kmet there and more of some more hands-on experience there as well. So I do expect the production from Cole Kmet to go up. Now, is he going to be all pro production? That's not what I'm thinking here, but I'm thinking that we will see a Cole Kmet that has 7 to 9 touchdowns next year with between 500 to 600 yards. I think that'd be a pretty solid season for Cole Kmet.
V-Dog just reminded me of something that I saw minutes before we went live. Ian Rappaport is reporting that the Bears have requested Rams assistant head coach and passing game coordinator Aubrey Pleasant to interview for their vacant defensive coordinator job under Ben Johnson.
Yeah.
I thought at first I was like wondering what the hell, but then I did a little research into Pleasant, and he has coached defensive backs. He's got almost as much experience coaching on defense as he does the offense. Now, Visual Joe says this could potentially be just to fulfill the Rooney role.
Rooney
where you
rule.
have to interview at least one person of color for the job. Your thoughts?
That's exactly it. And because we talked about it with Lorin. Ira Pleasant, they did cross paths. He was with Detroit a couple years ago. He was a passing game coordinator there in Detroit. So they do have a connection there between Ben Johnson and him. But I do believe that this is a potential Rooney rule a fulfillment of that rule. And I think that's why Pleasant's coming in.
Yeah. let me see what else I got here that I want to share with you to comment on. Let's go here. This is Ryan Poles talking about how Ben Johnson is going to help Caleb. Very interesting comment.
We're going to spend a lot of time together. That was part of our interview process. I said, how do you?
That's the wrong one. Let me try this one.
He's going to be challenged to be a professional football player, to do the little things the right way. And that foundation, I know Ben's going to hit that early and often, get that foundation strong, because you're going to build everything off of there. So once that's there, now we can continue to get better and play more consistently.
Right.
Danny,
I caught that as well. That as well.
We've been hearing
Professional
stories.
football player. To be a professional football player, to do the little things well. Obviously, we don't know what he means by that, but we can only assume, whether it's his work habits, his study habits, or whatnot. But that's some of the things we heard about Caleb. Unfortunately, coming out of USC, he's a guy that he's a more of a me than we guy. So that's not what we saw at all in terms of the season this year. I mean, as we saw Caleb, be a team guy and all that stuff. And quite frankly, guys, the more Caleb talks, the more I like him. The more I like his personality. I think he's straightforward. I don't think he BS's you. He'll give you thoughtful answers to your questions. So I'm not down on Caleb at all. But that was a comment that kind of perked my attention as well. So again, I don't know if it's just me putting extra time in terms of his footwork, in terms of some of the things the basic stuff that quarterback play you need. So we'll see. And I think that's something that Ben Johnson kind of stressed to him, say, hey, we are going to be tight at the hip. We're going to break it down and kind of build you up from the bottom up. And I do expect that to improve. And obviously, we've saw a lot of inaccuracy in terms of, Caleb getting the ball downfield, overthrowing guys or just being wildly inaccurate. And I think a lot of that stemmed from the lack of protection, the fact that he had to speed up his mechanics, his feet got all over the place. And I think that's something that you're going to have to build and break down and fix. But in order to fix him, you're going to have to fix the offensive line. So Caleb has some confidence to go and take some time and be able to not rush his throws or rush his progressions. And so I think that's what he was talking about that. So we'll see. But that was a curious comment that Poles made there.
Yeah, I got that. Now let's listen to Caleb Williams talking about what he is most anticipating with Coach Johnson.
What he's been able to do over there with Detroit in that offense. You don't see an offense doing things that they were doing without somebody like Ben at the helm of it, just because there's so much time and so much effort and so much energy and passion that goes into it. That's great and all, but without the discipline and accountability, you don't get to do all those cool things like the stumble bum that he talked about with us, which he also brought up to me as soon as we talked, and I didn't truly appreciate it. And then things like somebody like Tom Brady being like, I've never seen that in my life, and he's been through so many games, so many opportunities and things like that he's had on the field and watching. When they pitched it to the running back, and then they pitched it back to Amara for like a 20-yard, almost scored. I don't know how long the distance was, but you don't have cool, creative things like that without somebody like him, obviously being such a creative mind, and then being super disciplined, being super, and holding all the guys accountable throughout the weeks and training camp and all these different things.
He actually
First of all, my question is, how did Caleb get into your closet and pull out that outfit that he was wearing?
Yeah, that was my closet from about 40 years ago, where I used to watch the Shaft movies. And
exactly.
But it's interesting that he talked about the creativity, but he also volunteers the whole discipline thing. And I think that I'm just speculating here, but I almost wonder if this young man maybe spends a lot of time on video games, maybe puts the playbook aside and so forth. And then when he shows up to quarterback meetings, there's things that he's missing that he should have been studying the night before. Because Thomas Brown had told us he's had some serious talks with this guy about being a professional. And now that carries over into today's press conference with the general manager talking about it, with the new head coach talking about it, with the quarterback himself talking about it. There is clearly an issue with what Caleb did. And conversely, we hear Jaden Daniels being talked about. He's the first one at the facilities. He's the last one out of facilities. He's so confident because he studied the playbook and knows it left and right. So if there's clearly, Caleb is the more talented of the two, and both are extremely talented, but Caleb doesn't have the mindset that Jaden Daniels has, and hopefully Ben Johnson will bring that out of him.
Yeah, and then there was also that little blip in the middle of the season where they were going through their struggles, where veteran players were talking about maybe benching Caleb, suggesting to bench Caleb, and that could be right there. Although what you're talking about, because they see, if he's not putting in that effort that we are putting in, what the hell is going on here? And maybe that could have, and again, we're just speculating, right? Maybe that could have led to some of that DJ Moore stuff we saw, in terms of body language on the field. Who knows? But the one thing that I do think happened, and I think was a detriment to Caleb, was he wasn't coached hard. He wasn't, between Eberflus, between Shane Waldron. I think they kind of just brought him in here and just assumed he was gonna take his talents and was gonna take over and do things. Even Ryan Poles touched to the fact that during training camp, there are stuff that was let go during the season that never was corrected, right? And then came in here, he was given the kid glove treatment, right? They all wanted to kind of suck up to him and make sure he liked Chicago and all that stuff, and maybe never challenged him, maybe never put him down in front of the team, and kind of called him out in front of the team and held him accountable. And to his credit, it seemed like Caleb was kind of asking for that. He wanted to be coached hard. He wanted a coach that would challenge him, because he goes, that's how I thrive. I want a coach that coaches hard because I play hard. I want a coach that has a competitive fire because I have a competitive fire. And maybe that's why he sees a guy like Ben Johnson, a perfect fit for Caleb, and he's going to be able to take some of those things they took for granted. Because if you're coming in, right, Aldo, and you're doing, like you said, you're playing video games the night before, you haven't done your homework, you come in and your coach doesn't get, he goes, oh, Aldo, you're supposed to look at this. Oh man, I didn't. All right, well, let's look at it. If he doesn't hold you accountable, if he doesn't tell you, put you on blast, if you will, you're going to keep doing it, right? Because there's nothing that's going to make you change. So maybe that's what they're talking about. Maybe hopefully that's what's going to go and help him. Because like I said, I love Caleb's talents, and I know the whole Jaden versus Caleb thing. And if you put 10 GMs and you ask them straight up before the draft, would you draft Caleb over Jaden? They still would take him because of the talent that he has there. Now, if these things are little coaching things that are going to be brought up here and improved by Ben Johnson, look out, because then you have a complete quarterback. And the one thing that Cliff Kingsbury, I know you and I aren't a big fan of his in terms of head coach, but what he is as an offensive coordinator, he's evolved a little bit, and I bet you he holds Jaden Daniels, accountable for stuff that he misses or he doesn't do. And not that from what we heard, he's not one of those guys, but he holds him accountable. Dan Quinn holds the rest of that team accountable. They had this was like a social club here with Eberflus and Waldron running this damn thing. So hopefully that all changes next season.
Indeed. Samuel says, sounds like Caleb didn't respect Waldron or Brown enough to follow their lead. He needed someone who has had success and will demand that he follows their lead. And then Rock adds, yo guys, but we saw this in college from Caleb. This is no surprise. We already know that by watching film, we just need someone who can get that out of him. So I understand what Rock is saying, that, those last 6 games at USC where they went 1-5, the Caleb, the numbers statistically looked good, but there was definitely something going on. It seemed like with the passing of an opportunity to get to a bowl game, his interest in winning waned or something like that. We're just speculating here, but it is concerning, and hopefully Ben Johnson can unlock that mental closet that he has, and that he is, shutting his coaches out, and unlock that, and he's totally invested. I just hope we don't have a quarterback who talks a good game, looks a good game, has all these great physical prowess, but in reality, as soon as he gets home, he lights up a doobie and he starts watching, psychedelic TV or whatever. I'm just kidding. But, somebody who isn't invested in the game and loves the game like you have to be in order to be a successful quarterback in this league.
especially playing that position, that's the hardest position in sports to play, the quarterback. If you're not fully invested, if you're not totally into it, it's hard for you to have success week in and week out. And like I said, I hope that's not the case with Caleb. The one thing that I saw, and maybe you guys would agree, he went through lulls in games, right? There was times where it just it looked like he was, whatever reason, he was off beat, he was off time, there was no rhythm to the offense. But you know what? When it became crunch time and there was a chance for him to go and win the game, he locked in. And that was where he was at his best. So maybe it's that competitive juice that needs to be flowing in him 24/7 for that game. Now that's something that needs to change, obviously, right? Because that's not something that's going to be something that you can keep doing in NFL. But I always noticed 2 minute, whatever 4 minute opportunity to go take the lead and drive this team down football. Caleb locked in, and he was different. But between the second and third quarters, there was a little bit of a lull there and some inconsistencies in this game.
Yeah, indeed. All right. I got one more I want to play for you, and then we're going to talk draft. This is, where is it? This is, I think we played that one. Oh, people were talking about the money. I know that you, Lorin, and Buffone talked about the contract from Poles, and Dog actually posted this just a little while ago. He says, I don't know if you caught it, but Cap reported yesterday on Cap and Jay Hood that there will be an extension in play for Poles at some point to sync everything up in job security, which was a concern before coming in. So this is what Kevin Warren said about it, and then we can talk about contract extension. Is he already signed? Is he not signed? We'll talk about it after this 20-second soundbite.
Are you going to extend him to get his?
Yeah, I mean, we as you know, we don't talk about people's employment. As you can see, Ryan is very comfortable. He's done an outstanding job, and I look forward to continually working with Ben and Ryan and George for many years in the future.
Kevin, can you?
Yeah, he went on to say we don't talk about it, and so. I think that's bad policy. You should let the fans know what you have done with your leadership. I understand. I grew up where I was told by my parents, you never ask people, how much money they were making. Well, that shit's out the window now. Everybody's sharing how much they make. You know how much every athlete in pro sports makes. I think they should at least not maybe say how much money he's making, but how many years he's under contract. You agree with that?
Right. Yeah, if there's alignment, we need to know, right? And that's why I don't think there's a contract extension out there. I think he's got 1 year. There's talk maybe he was secretly extended a couple years ago. Maybe he's got 2 years left. But either way, whatever it wasn't a deterrence for Ben Johnson. He's the one who he accepted it and he was good with it. So whether it's a year on Ryan Poles' contract, 2 years on Ryan Poles' contract, I think the main thing is, I think we all know, Ben Johnson's got more years and he's making more money than Ryan Poles, right? So if there's ever an issue where, there's a struggle or there's a battle, they're butting heads, guess who's going to win that one, right? It's Ben Johnson. So, and he'll bring in his guy, whoever he wants to team up with him and do that. So I don't think Ryan Poles deserves a contract extension based off of what he's done the first, 3 or 4 years of his career. Now, if he's a lame duck GM, you want to add another year just to kind of give him some of that security. I'm okay with that because, you can fire him after next season and you can pay him for a year and that's okay with that. Very rare do these coaches and executives go into the lame duck years on their contracts, right? Jerry Jones is a little, different there, but so yeah, if they give him a year and he's got 2 years left, I'm cool with that. But to give him a multi-year extension to match the new head coach, I'm not okay with that because he still needs to go out there and he needs to prove that he's worthy of being a GM of this team.
Right. Those contracts usually have attached to them a non-disclosure agreement. So, for instance, Eberflus is under contract still for another year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And absolutely certain that he was reminded in his exit interview that he can't talk about any of the shit that went down and so forth. And he's going to comply because he doesn't want to potentially lose those millions of dollars that come. When I left my corporate job, they basically did the same thing to me. They say, if you say anything about the secret sauce here at McDonald's, we're going to come after you for the money we're paying you. So I'm sure that happens in the NFL as well. All right. There's a bunch of questions here that I want to get to. Samo is asking you, what do you think about the VR headset training that Jaden Daniels does weekly to prepare for his opponent? I don't know if you saw that story, Danny, but apparently he is putting on these virtual reality glasses and basically playing his opponent in a virtual way. Samo goes on to say, it's said that he plays at 2 times the speed so that the live games are slower. You heard about that, Danny?
Yeah, I heard that's part of the training. And the one thing is the Bears have that, because I've heard other players talk about they have the VR setup as well. So, if that's
Trubisky talked about it. Yeah.
Right. So if that's something that is helping Jane Daniels, the only thing I will caution everybody is like different players learn different ways, right? You might be able to read a book and memorize it and take a test tomorrow. I might need to take a couple weeks just to kind of digest everything, review it. So everyone learns at different pace, different speed. So if that works for Jane Daniels, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for Caleb Williams or any other quarterbacks. But if it is a tool that can help him, I am all for it. Like we talked about, is there anything that could help him get better? That Caleb, that is, I'm all for it. So, but the only thing is, like, I don't like saying, all right, this guy does this, so you should do this, and you'll be successful, because everyone learns at a different kind of rate, different kind of tools, different kind of pace.
Indeed. Rock says, yo, guys, Poles had already gotten an extension. Y'all think that Ben Johnson would have come here and received a 5-year deal, and Poles only has 2 years left on his contract? Rock, the way that I see it is that he could be thinking, hey, if Poles is gone in a year or 2 years or even, whenever, I can then bring in my GM, because I know I'm going to be here for 5 years. There's no way they're going to get rid of me. So, it's hard to, we don't know for sure. We're just speculating. Everybody's speculating, but I wouldn't put too much stock on Ben Johnson coming here. I mean, he started the press conference, the Zoom press conference, by saying, I want to be there. And he ended it, I want to be there. I mean, he really wants this job.
Right. And then, again, and like I said, even if Poles has 1 year left on his contract, and Ben Johnson says, hey, I'm going to be here. He's confident in himself. He looks like he's someone who's confident in himself. And I think if he goes off, and like I said, if Poles is gone or doesn't come back, I'll go get my guy, Ray Agnew from Detroit, bring him in here and be, he's the assistant GM there in Detroit. He'll be the GM here as well. He'll some guy that I'm aligned with, and a lot of teams are doing that nowadays. Is it's funny. Look at Jacksonville. They kept their GM Trent Baalke, and he was a menace to any coaching candidate. And now all of a sudden, 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks after the season, now they fired Trent Baalke and says, because they no GM, no coach wants to come work with him, right? So at least. Ben Johnson wanted the job so bad. He wanted to come work with Caleb. He wanted to have this roster, and he was okay with working with Brian Poles. And maybe they hit it off. And maybe, Poles and Johnson together, they do great. They have great. Then you can extend Poles, and that's all good and dandy. But if it doesn't work out, and if Ben Johnson, like I said, he makes more money, he's got a longer term contract. If there's a power struggle, Ben Johnson's winning that power struggle.
Before we talk about the NFL draft, we get a lot of questions coming in. I want to first touch on this very quickly. I looked up who were the unrestricted free agents coming up in March for the Detroit Lions, thinking, maybe Ben Johnson wants to bring some of these players. Well, there's only 2 starters from the offense that are going to be unrestricted free agents, and that's Kevin Zeitler, the 35-year-old right guard, and wide receiver Tim Patrick, who saw a lot of the starting snaps. But on defense, there's quite a few, including Ifeatu Melifonwu, Carlton Davis, Derek Barnes, Levy. Ooh, that's a tough one for me. Onu Wazuki and Marcus Davenport. Anybody, if you could pick one name here that you'd want to talk to their agent, Danny, who would it be?
Kevin Zeitler. Kevin Zeitler would come in here, plug and play right guard, former Baltimore Raven, Went to the University of Wisconsin in college, and I think he's a solid veteran guard. Again, he's not going to be commanding, in my opinion. He's 35 years old. He's not going to command top dollar in the market. So maybe he can come in here for a 1 year, 2 year deal because he's familiar with Ben Johnson, and you can plug him in on right guard. Then you can go spend and I think Zeitler can play left guard as well. So I mean he's a guy who can play left or right guard. But if you go and do that, bring him in, and now you bring in a Dahlman, for example, at center, and you can plug in the other position with another free agent. So I think Zeitler for me is a guy actually marked down here in terms of free agents possibilities for the Bears, offensive and defensive line. Zeitler is a guy I put down here as a guy that possibility for the Bears to go and get. Again, 35 years old. He didn't finish the season healthy. He missed a playoff game last week, so that could be a concern there for him. But he's an older, up there age guy. 35 years old. Zach Martin, there's talk about he might retire. The Dallas Cowboys, all pro, all world right guard. He's also a local guy. Went to Notre Dame. Maybe you can kind of convince him to come here, play for a year. Who knows? But if you want to bring in some of those veterans, and again, the thing about is building a culture is you got to have some of these veterans, some of these guys that can come in here and command respect and demand it and get it, and that helps build your culture, right? You can't just go get 3 draft picks and put them in the offensive line. So, all right, we got our offensive line. You might have offensive line in the future, but you got to develop those young draft picks. They're going to go through those struggles, right? So you got to get some veterans, especially on the offense and defensive line. I think that's where a lot of the culture guys are on the offense and defensive lines. And I think a guy like Zeitler, a guy like Zach Martin will help Ben Johnson come in and create and kind of flourish in terms of that culture. So those are guys I would love. I always go back to Ruben Brown. Remember when the Bears were guarding Ruben Brown? He was basically, he had no cartilage in his knees. Everybody said he was done. Came in here. That guy was one tough SOB. He helped set that culture, him and Olin Kreutz, and he was a Pro Bowler a couple of years. So don't give up on these older age offensive linemen. Yeah, they might not be as younger as some of the other guys, but man, they've been through some wars, and these are guys that can help you in the locker room and also on the football field. So Zeitler and Zach Martin, 2 guys in their mid-30s, are guys that if you can bring in here, I would I'm not talking about a 5-6 year contract, 1 or 2 year deal, get them in here again. Help set that culture there, and also help fortify your offensive line.
J-Rock reminds us also that their swing tackle, Dan Skipper, is due to become a free agent too. He might be an interesting pickup to take over that Larry Borum role, or maybe even be a stopgap tackle if play him behind Braxton Jones, and if Braxton doesn't work out, then you got Dan Skipper to put in there for a transition year.
Yeah, as long as he's not counting on him to be your starter. Yeah, I definitely would bring a nice swing tackle, a guy that can obviously he plays a lot of that 3 tight end formation for Detroit, and he's a guy that actually got a couple passes. He caught a pass, I believe, a touchdown pass earlier this year. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't mind getting another guy who can help set the culture and kind of bring in what Ben Johnson wants to get set up in that locker room.
All right, let's finish the show by talking a little bit about the draft. Today, Mel Kiper released his first mock draft. And of course, mock drafts, to me anyway, mock drafts before free agency are kind of a waste of time. But you do get to learn a little bit about the players by reading about them, by conducting your own mock drafts. And so Mel Kiper mocks Will Campbell to the Bears at number 10. And this is what he wrote. Campbell gave up just 2 sacks over 524 pass block snaps this season. There are some length concerns, and he might kick inside to guard, but Chicago needs help all over that line. And Kiper did bypass Kelvin Banks, who he actually has ranked higher on his board, but he thought Campbell is a better fit for Chicago, and Josh Simmons and a couple of other tackles. In other words, Will Campbell was the first offensive lineman off his board. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I love Will Campbell, and of the 3, again, it's early on in the process, and Campbell. If you tell me between Campbell, Banks, and Simmons, Campbell is my top guy. 6'6", 325 is where he comes in at. There is issues with his arm length. There's talk about he could come in under 33 inches in terms of arm length, which obviously we had this conversation before, right? In terms of how much I like my tackles with the long arms and the length. Watching his tape, he does struggle a little bit with some power, but he is athletically, he's probably the best of the three in terms of, a natural left tackle, prospect, if you will. So I think he's a guy that if he measures in with, at least 33 and longer in terms of arm length, I would give him a shot at left tackle. But yeah, I mean, if you kick him inside left guard, I have no problem with him and left guard. He's a guy that's got some nasty to him. So I love that he finishes his blocks, and he's a guy that will be a future building block on the offensive line. My only concern is at 10, that's a bit too rich for me. The unfortunate part with this draft is there is no Joe Alt this year. There is no J.C. Latham this year. There isn't that surefire, left or right tackle, if you will. And they're all projections. Even Kelvin Banks, he's going to come in around 6'2", 6'3", not 6'2", about 6'3.5" or something like that. The length will be an issue there. Some of his tape isn't the greatest, in my opinion. Another guy that I could see probably kicking inside the guard. So, and then Simmons was a guy. Athletically, he also has the length. He's got the feet. He's got the ability to play left tackle, but he's coming off a torn ACL, and he's another developmental type of player as well. So with the 10th pick, you if you're running polls, you can't afford to take another flyer on a guy that's coming off an injury who's still developing. You have to have someone to come in here and go surefire. Now, if you trade down and you go say 15 or 14 or something like that, then Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks, if they're still there, are definitely in that range. But if you stay at 10, for me, it's got to be defensive lineman.
Great response, and everybody is thrilled to hear you talking about the draft. Let me see. I got some questions here regarding the draft. Let me start with this one. Samuel had a scenario. Samuel's playing GM here. He wants your thoughts on this. What does Danny think about signing free agents, left tackle Alaric Jackson, left guard Aaron Banks, and center Drew Dahlman to fix the offensive line this season? We have the cap space to get them all and still have some left. Your thoughts?
Well, Samuel, actually, Alaric Jackson was on one of my guys on my list here for free agents. He's a guy that remember, we went to the Iowa Northwestern game, Aldo. I don't know if you remember this.
That's right. Absolutely.
And Tristan Wirfs were both the left and right tackles, respectively, at Iowa. And I said, look at this Alaric Jackson kid. I like him at left tackle. So I don't know if you remember that day or not. But, yeah, he's with the Rams. He's starting. He's only 27 years old. So he's a guy that definitely could come in here and at least compete for the left tackle position. So I do like Alaric Jackson there. Aaron Banks, I didn't see him on the free agent list. I'm not sure if he's a free agent or not. But if he is, I thought he was signed, he was drafted 3 years ago, so I'm not sure if he's a free agent. But Alaric Jackson, Drew Dahlman is a veteran center from Atlanta, also on my free agent list. But yeah, I mean, that would be something that you could do there. And then, if you get Alaric Jackson left tackle, because obviously, Braxton Jones, there's still talk about, first of all, will he be recovered? Where will he be in terms of recovery from that broken ankle? So there's questions in terms of will he be prepared to start the season off? Obviously, with a new system being put in, you want to be ready by OTAs. He probably won't be ready by OTAs. So, a kid like Alaric Jackson could come in and compete for that spot. Definitely, if you do trade down, now you got a Will Campbell. Will Campbell can slide into left guard like we were just talking about. You got a Drew Dahlman there at center, and then you can go plug and play. Maybe get a Kevin Zeitler that we talked about, or like a Zach Martin, a veteran, a 1 or 2 year deal, and plug up right guard. Now all of a sudden you got the makings of a solid formation there in terms of the offensive line. But yeah, those are guys that I definitely like. There's other guys that. Patrick McCarry, who's a left guard for the Ravens at 27 years old. He's also a guy that can play some tackle and kick inside to guard. He's another guy that gives that big physical presence. And I do believe now with Ben Johnson coming in, like I've said before, this is going to be a more of a this offensive line is going to be a more physical unit as opposed to what we've been accustomed to here with that wide zone scheme that we've had the last couple of seasons. So instead of young, athletic, guys that move east and west, I think you're going to want more stout guys at the line of scrimmage, guys that I call people movers at the line of scrimmage, guys that can bring some force at the point of attack, because you're going to see a lot of inside zone. You're going to see a lot of counters. You're going to see a lot of trays. You're going to see a lot of traps with the way that the run game is set up here by Ben Johnson. So, a guy like McCarry, Patrick McCarry will fit in now as opposed to maybe he didn't fit in the past. Guys like, Alaric Jackson could fit here as well. Ryan Kelly, another veteran center there as well, you can think of too. So, there's another different ways you got to attack it, but you got to attack it both the draft and free agency, and you got to get at least at the minimum, you got to fortify that inside of that offensive line. You're on mute, my friend.
Samuel says that Aaron Banks will be an unrestricted free agent this offseason, and the 49ers probably will not re-sign him because they're having some cap challenges, I believe, with Brock Purdy's contract coming up. And I think that's exactly what I saw. I just wanted to make sure. He was a second-round pick in 2021, and Samuel is right. Yeah, so
Aaron Banks, but I think he's like 25, 20, 26, 27 years old. So another guy, young guy that you can be a building block. Yeah, right. I mean, if Aaron Banks is out there, he's definitely a guy you can plug in at guard. I believe he played, if I remember correctly, he played tackle at Notre Dame. He was kicked inside the guard with the 49ers. So yeah, definitely a guy that intrigues me there.
D. Starren says, with the new head coach, do Bears get more practices? Yes, they get another week of OTAs. They get to start earlier on OTAs, so they do get that. And also, he talked about, he being, of course, Ben Johnson, when he was on ESPN, he was asked by Yurko, we're going to see some more intensity in practices? And he says, absolutely. You got to put the players through that experience before the season. So you're going to see these guys play in preseason. You're going to see some very heavy duty practices. But getting back to the draft, got some more questions for you, Danny. I got one starred here. Danny from J-Rock, M. Williams or Jay Pierce at number 10?
I'm assuming he's talking about Mykel Williams or James Pierce Jr. at number 10. And for me, if we're bringing in Dennis Allen and we're running that true 4-3 base, I think Mykel Pierce is the guy to go with there. I have his scouting information here in front of me. Give you a second here with Mykel Pierce. Yeah, Mykel Williams, I'm sorry, from Georgia. Missed 2 games this year, but he's a guy that's got the size, the length, about 6'3", 6'5". He's got the long arms, 10.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 21 pressures this year. He's a guy that his motor ran a little bit hot and cold for me, but man, when he was on, he was on. And I think if you're running the base 4-3 that Dennis Allen likes to run, I think Mykel Williams will be that guy. James Pierce is more of a speed edge rusher. 6'5", 240 pounds. He's got that first step quickness. 11 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. He had 10 sacks last year, so he's a guy that can bring that pressure off the edge. But there's a lot of talks about in terms of is he a tweener? Is he more of a 3-4 outside linebacker? Now, Ryan Poles mentioned that they could possibly go to a 3-4 depending on who they bring in as a defensive coordinator. So if that's the case, then that's a whole new ballgame, right? So, but yeah, I mean, for me, if Dennis Allen is the defensive coordinator and he's going to stick with this 4-3, Mykel Williams out of Georgia is a guy that I do like at number 10.
Love it. Dylan Randuns, somebody just brought up his name. He is going to be a free agent. This guy was labeled the bust his first 2 seasons, but his play ascended a little bit.
He was a second round pick out of North Dakota State, and I think he's a guy that came in. I liked him coming out as possibly a right tackle. I know he's kind of floundered there in Tennessee as a tackle. He could be a guard prospect, maybe kick him inside. But again, as a guy that you kind of have to take a look. Your coaches are going to have to take a look at him and look at him and see if they like him. Again, he's more of an athletic guy. I'm not sure how much in terms of how much of a road grader he is. So depending on who your offensive line coach is and what the preference is, he may or may not fit the scheme. But yeah, I mean, definitely a guy you might get on the cheap. Again, second round pick who's kind of fallen on hard times, could play some tackles. At worst, could be a swing tackle, could be a guy that can kick inside the guard and back up some multiple positions there as well. So definitely a guy you can bring in and give him a shot. But if you're talking about guys like day one starters, Dahlman, Zeitler, Zach Martin, obviously Trey Smith, these are the guys that I do like coming in here and getting those day one starting positions.
Cliff wants to know best player available at number 10 or trade down.
Depends who's available, Cliff, right? If for example, Abdul Carter, which it won't happen, but Abdul Carter is down there at number 10, you cannot pass that guy up, right? If a guy like Mason Graham is there at 10, you can't pass that guy up, right? And also, this is not a heavy quarterback draft. Might have two quarterbacks taken in the top 10, maybe just one. Who knows? There's a lot going on. It's still early in the process, but if you want to trade down, you're gonna need a partner. You can't just say, "Oh, I want to trade down number 15. Give me this." There's a player that team's gonna want to come up and trade up for. So the unfortunate part is that there isn't many players in terms of that teams are gonna fall in love with as early on in this process. Now you get closer to the draft, teams get a little more desperate. free agency happens, you might lose a player here and there. Next thing you know, a team feels, they all go up and make a trade. But yeah, if I could trade down, Cliff, and get to 12, 13, 14, 15, and I can get a Will Campbell or even a Banks or even, some other guy offensive line, I would do that, right? But again, it depends on who's available. But if a guy like Mason Graham or Abdul Carter's there in my dreams, even Michael Williams, I might not pass on Michael Williams if I'm at number 10. So, but we'll see how it all shakes and plays out.
Marshall University has an intriguing defensive end named Mike Green, and Samuel's asking you about him. What does Danny think about Mike Green?
Really, first step quickness, got that flexibility. The bend. He's going to be at the Senior Bowl. He's a guy I'm going to be looking to scout there at the Senior Bowl. So that's going to be a guy that can go ahead, and he's already got a buzz going. Now goes to the Senior Bowl, and let's see what he puts on. He puts on a show there. He can be a bigger buzz. But yeah, he's a guy not top 10 for me, Mike Green. If that's a guy, as of right now, he's probably second round range. If I had to, guess, maybe has a chance with a great, Senior Bowl, great combine, just kind of, plays out. He can probably maybe sneak into the bottom half of the first round. But there's a bunch of edge guys that are out there, and just a couple of guys I talked about, Michael Williams and Abdul Carter. Nick Scourton from Texas A&M. This is a guy that really has put on a show this past year. 6'3", 285. He's been labeled some of that tweener, bit. There's talk about his length in terms of, can he hold up on the edge as a hand in the ground defensive end? He's too big to be a 3-4 linebacker is what, the talk is early on. But again, last year at Purdue, he had, 10 sacks, right? This year he had 14 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. So this is a guy that gets to the quarterback, but again, not a number 10, more of a guy you can probably maybe trade down and get there as well. So a ton of players, a ton of good guys out there. In terms of defensive tackles, Walter Nolan from Ole Miss is a guy to keep an eye on, probably later on half of that first round. Also a guy from Texas A&M that transferred, went to Ole Miss this year, and Kenneth Grant, the other guy, Mason Graham's partner there in Michigan. He's not that he's not as athletic and twitchy as Mason Graham is in terms of a one gap penetrator, but definitely got like occupy blocks. Still developing, still has the potential to get better in terms of as a pass rusher. But 6'3", 339, this guy will occupy your blockers. But again, if you're bringing in Dennis Allen, he wants more of those upfield one gap attacking guys, so he might not be a fit. But I love Kenneth Grant in terms of his future at the next level at the NFL.
All right, good stuff. I got a question here from Slick. Danny, what about Ariante Ursere in Minnesota, 6'6", 330, and Gray Zabel, 6'6", 305 out of North Dakota at second or third round. Boy, that Zabel guy, he plays up and down the offensive line, so he could be that versatile offensive lineman you need. What do you think of these two guys?
I haven't dug into Zabel's tape just yet, but Ursay I have, and he's a mountain of a man, 6'6", 330. And again, if you're talking about, but he's a right tackle. He's not a guy you can stick inside or a left tackle. He's a right tackle for me at the next level. Again, and I've been here, saying for months now that for me, Darnell Wright's best position might be right guard. So if you want to kick him inside of right guard, fill that spot, bring in a kid like Ursay and have him compete at right tackle, that could be something you could look at. But I think for me, he's a right tackle only. And we'll see how that goes. If they do not want to move Darnell Wright off of that spot, then I think a player like Ursay might be a little bit of a luxury in the second round, unless you fall in love with him and you see him as a guy potentially could be a starter, and then you can move Darnell Wright into a right tackle. Then you can go there. But with those first 3 picks, which I believe are top 41, you got to get 3 starters of those picks. Even the first 4 picks, because they have 4 in the first top 75. Those 4 guys have to be starters next year. I don't want any projects. I don't want any punters. I don't want any special teams guys. I want guys that can come in here and start from day one. 3 out of those 4 should be offensive defensive linemen. The other one, if you want a receiver, we talked about maybe a running back to kind of fit the need there in the backfield to kind of offset DeAndre Swift. Maybe I could see that, but it's got to be 3 out of 4 got to be offense or defensive linemen.
J2K wants to know if you've talked about the Iowa Hawkeye defensive lineman Yahya Black.
I have not talked about him yet. I have not dug into his tape yet, J2K, but he's a guy that I'm going to be looking at in my list.
6'5", 22-year-old out of Iowa Hawkeyes, and he's 22 years old. So we'll expect Danny to have a full report on him next time. Let's see. Sorry, what?
I love the name.
What was that? Yeah, isn't it cool?
Remember the guy I loved a couple years ago, edge guy, and
Yaya
he's on
Diaby.
Yaya Diaby, and
Yeah,
he's doing a hell of a job now with the Buccaneers.
He really, really is. Quick story about him. He told me about how much it meant for his family to make it to the NFL to help them because his mother had always, watched out for all the kids in the family and so forth. He was so indebted to his mom. And then when the interview was older, I told him, I just happened to lose my mom about a month ago. This 6'5" football player gives me a big hug. And he says, I'm sorry. And I was in love with him because he was just such an authentic, nice guy. But Samuel's got one last one for you. Are you completely opposed to drafting Ashton Genty? The first time I heard his name, Danny, was from your lips in the first round. Let's say he falls to 10. That is, if we shore up our offensive line in free agency, he would be a real weapon in this Ben Johnson offense. What do you think? Your thoughts?
I love Ashton Genty. I highlighted him on Shimon Spotlights during Buffone 55, and he's a kid I absolutely love. But at top 10, I just cannot take a running back at top 10 because you can get guys I already talked about. You can get guys like Trayvon Henderson or Caleb Johnson. You can get him. If Judkins comes out from Ohio State, you can get him in the second and third round. Dylan Sampson from Tennessee is out there. Mario Hampton from North. There's a ton of guys you can find. There's only a handful of guys. There's going to be a lot more you can get in the third, fourth round possibly, right? So because you have the needs up front, and even if you attack it via free agency, or even if you go and get 3 offensive linemen and you get a defensive tackle, you still need an edge guy opposite of Montez Sweat. You still need other need. Safety is a position that we don't talk about, but that could be a position of need as well. Byers a free agent. Jaquan Briscoe. There's questions about him, right? Linebacker. If I've talked about maybe Tremaine Edmonds might be a guy that could be a cap cut. How are you going to replace him? Are you okay with just you're going to need some depth behind T.J. Edwards and Jack Sanborn as well. So there's going to be other needs that you can fill. And now if you were talking about trading down and maybe going in the 20s in the first round and you recoup some of the other picks, okay, I can see you going, Genty if he's still there. But just 10 for me is just too rich for a position where you can find, not comparable backs, but backs that can come in and be part of a committee backfield and help you, progress down the field. Receiver, I haven't even touched on receiver. We're going to need a receiver. Talk about a speed guy that could be able to stretch the field vertically. How about a tight end? How about Tyler Warren from Penn State or something like that, where you can flank him out and be another weapon for Caleb Williams. Again, offensive, defensive line for me are unless you trade down, get more picks. Now I got more than just 3 or 4 in the first 75. Then we can kind of get a little silly with it here if you want. But if just the 4 picks in the top 74, you got to get 3 of those picks got to be offensive, defensive linemen, and the 1 pick you can play with it. You can play a receiver, you can play a tight end, you can play a running back, whatever you need. But 3 of those 4 have to be on the line of scrimmage picks.
It's January 22nd, 2025. We could be remembering this day as a historic day where the Bears' fortunes finally changed. Ben Johnson is a hit at his introductory press conference. Eddie, what are your final thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, I think I feel good. I mean, it's rare for me, and I started the show off with John saying it's rare for me to feel good after a Bears press conference, especially when they're introducing a new head coach. And there's certain things I didn't want. I didn't want any sort of acronyms. I didn't want any sort of coach speak, and I didn't want any sort of awkward moments or things that my kids call cringe. I don't want any of that stuff, right? And I didn't get it. I know he was a coach that appeared authentic. He was emotional initially, thinking his family, thinking Dan Campbell, some of the other coaches in his past. And he's a guy that just came off as a guy that's genuine, that knows what he's talking about, knows what he wants. Even though he's never been a head coach before, showed that he could command a room and be a presence in front of the media at least. And I think, he spoke to his players and was honest to them. And I think that's something that we can look forward to. And, he said all the right things for me. He talked about building, tearing down that offense and not bringing the Detroit playbook and saying, all right, Caleb, you're going to fit into this. No, we're going to tear it down. I'm going to work with Caleb. Caleb's going to be next to me. We're going to be hip to hip from now on to the start of the season. And I'm going to build an offense around Caleb and the weapons he has on the outside. He talked about, getting some more players on the offensive line, which is music to my ears. So he hit all the right notes, right? And like I said, this was the first press conference I was encouraged, man. I felt like, damn, I think we got the right guy here. Now, that's a start. Now the real work begins. Right now, you got to go and fill in some of these gaps. You got to go through and get, first of all, get that coaching staff filled in. Now go get these gaps, in terms of player acquisition, free agency first, and then we hit the draft. And now let's see what happens. Aldo, you touched on it real quick. He did say that he was going to be more of a there was going to be more contact in practices. This is going to be a physical team. I feel like offensive line is going to be more physical. And I feel like Dennis Allen's going to bring, if he's a defensive coordinator, he's going to be a more physical defensive front as well. So, if for those like me who love contact and love that line of scrimmage, physicality, I think you're going to be happy with the way, Ben Johnson's going to go ahead and inform this team. And I'm optimistic, man. And it's very rare for me to be this optimistic after a coaching hire from the Bears. But man, I feel good, and hopefully, knock on wood, everything works out well. And Caleb, and Ben Johnson grow together. And then we have a team that all of us can sit there and watch Sundays and be happy and proud of to root for and cheer for, and not just come back every week and talk about how we were embarrassed nationally, how we were a laughing stock. So the one thing I do have to say, I think the Bears have been moved off from the laughing stock of the league pedestal. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars have been put on there now in terms of what they've done here this offseason. So I think that's a positive as well. The Bears aren't the laughing stock right now. Jacksonville's kind of taking over, So we'll see how that goes.
Very, very true. Leadership comes in many different sizes and shapes and styles and so forth. But you need three distinct things. You need a vision, and you need to communicate about that vision in a very precise and inspiring way. And then third, you got to execute on that vision. Today, Ben Johnson presented that vision, and he did it in a very effective way. And now what needs to happen is, of course, he has to execute it. He's got to lead those players, and he's got to get more out of those players. We know there's a lot more to these players than we saw in 2024 under Matt Eberflus. Now we need to see in 2025 whether this new head coach, Ben Johnson, can get the max out of all these players, because if they can, I truly believe we can make a push for the playoffs in 2025. You think so, Danny? 2025 playoffs?
Hey, he said it. Ben Johnson put the target on his back. He expects to compete next year for the playoffs. So if he wants to say it, if he believes it, and he gets these players believing in it, we've seen it happen from worst to first, right? So I can see them. They have talent on this team. You get the right coaches, bring in the right players to build that culture and fortify some of these holes. I could see them, making the playoffs next year, or at least competing to make the playoffs.
Thank you for over the 700 people across all of our platforms who joined us live, at least for a little bit or the entire show. And a special thanks to Jason and Lennox for their contributions to the bar room. Really, really appreciate that. We will see you all. I might do a show tomorrow. If I'm as happy tomorrow as I am right now, I might come back on here and talk some more shit with all you great Bears fans. We will see you all very soon. Just subscribe and you'll get alerts as to the next time we're live. Goodbye, everybody.